Hey guys, I've gotten a lot of comments on my videos of people asking me about my profile for my deck, because I've uploaded a lot of combos, but I haven't actually uploaded a deck profile. I kind of held off because I didn't think there was an appropriate time for me to upload a deck profile, but now that Master Duel's out, I think it's a perfect time. I was able to climb to Plat 1 relatively quickly with the deck, and I thought I'd show you guys my deck profile. Okay, so the deck profile is 50 cards. We run a lot of hand traps, and I can go over why the specific hand traps in a second, but we run a lot of hand traps and a lot of back row stuff because there's no siding in Master Duel whatsoever. So we have to kind of run a bit of everything, you know, at like proper ratios, because if you lose the coin flip, it's it. You're going second, and if you can't play going second, then you're gonna lose. So for starters, I ran triple Valor, and I still run triple Valor in the TCG because you want to stop your opponent's starter. You want them to make as weak of a board opening as possible. So it stops a lot of like relevant starters too, and I just think it's a good card in general. Maxi, because it's at 3. If you don't run it in your deck, you're kind of trolling. So I ran 3 Maxi. 2 Gamma because it's at 2. It synergizes well with Stardust because when Stardust leaves the board, you can Gamma your opponent. The Gamma becomes live basically on your opponent's turn. It's like a live hand trap. Whereas some decks it's only good if they're like going second, or you know, if they don't establish a board. So we can use this going first and second, so it's like the best hand trap for the deck. Ash Blossom, the most generic hand trap, makes sense. Nibiru we ran at 2 because we lose hard to combo decks if they establish a giant board, but we don't run 3 because we're playing the OCG and we're not going to come across a lot of combo decks. So I just opted to run it at 2. Plus you can draw into it through Max C, so it doesn't make any sense to run it at 3. And Infinite Impermanence, same thing as a Valor. It stops starters, but you can also set it as a negate. With Valor, you can't play it. You can flip it on your turn. With Valor, you can't really activate on your turn. It's not as versatile as Imperm, so we run it at 3 also. Okay, now I'm going to move on to the tech choices or tech options you want to call it. So there can be only one. We can play under this card perfectly fine. We don't get hurt whatsoever by it at all. It stops a lot of decks, basically kills them. So it's kind of like our Degenerate. It's like our Skill Drain or our Rivalry of the Warlords or Gozen or whatever. We run it because we have to. We have to keep up with the meta, and it's the only way we can do so. Not really. If this card got limited or banned or whatever, we'd be able to play. We'd be able to adapt, but it just, right now, it's a good card. Stops Sky Striker from like popping off. Stops Eldritch from like summoning the Golden Lord if he has like a trap up, or stops him from flipping his traps. Stops like a lot of deck. Dragon Link from spamming, yada yada yada. The list goes on. 2 Cross Up because it stops hand traps. We're really weak to those, but not as weak as people think. We have like an extender and Fire Ant, and I'll get to that in a second, but it allows us to, you know, play through hand traps, stop our opponent's Pot of Prosperity, you know, whatever, things like that. Maxi, most important reason why you run it. Call by the Grave, it's just to stop Maxi, hand trap, same as Cross Out, but except it's a little bit more on the offensive side. You can use it as a negate for the graveyard. Fire Ant, so this card here is an extender for our main play of, you know, when we summon Psi-Reflector. It's you summon the Psi-Reflector, and if it gets negated, you can summon Fire Ant, make Chaos Ruler, and then Chaos Ruler can make Hot Red, effectively giving yourself a negate. Plus Hot Red can like reoccur your Psi-Reflector next turn, so which is really relevant. It comes up all the time, so you can you know, keep playing the game and kind of grind out even after you lose your negate, initial negate. And if it's back behind it, there can be only one. That one negate's going to be fine. You just use it to protect this card. And then I guess the big bad boy himself, Psi-Reflector. So this card is the whole deck. It's like I would say it's like Alistair, but except it's the entire deck. Sentinel goes into this. You know, everything kind of revolves around this like one card. It can go into like, I mean, basically this deck makes synchros, and you use them as a toolbox. Like the extra deck is basically a toolbox for synchros. You know, emergency teleport, same idea. Goes into this. 1-for-1 goes into this. Like I said, Fire Ant's an extender, and that's basically the deck in a nutshell. You're playing around your like very, very strong consistency. This deck is incredibly consistent. You'll barely break. You'll go on like 10-game win streaks on this deck, not breaking one game. You'll always have a somewhat decent hand, because you run like a ton of starters. If you count Prosperity and the tankies and everything else in between, I think you're running like 15 or 16 starters, something like that. So it's a lot of starters to make your plays, and yeah, I think the deck is just really fun. And I guess we can move on to some replays, and I can kind of commentate over them and explain my reasoning behind why you know I made certain decisions. And I just want to make a point. You're playing this deck is below Rogue. It's like, I would say tier 4, so it's not very good. So everything, when you're playing it when you're playing the game, you have to play perfectly. Like, you have to make your plays perfectly. Like, everything has to be perfect. So you have to, I wouldn't pick this deck up as a complete beginner unless you're versing beginners. But if you're not, you should be very, very fine. But if you're playing a deck like this, you know, you're at a disadvantage at the end of the day because you are susceptible to, like, interruptions and things like that, as much as you can try to play through them. But again, the deck is very, very viable if you know how to play the game. So even though the deck is very simple, it's kind of like almost like a normal summon Alistair pass. You still have to know every interaction of all the decks you verse, because otherwise, you know, you're not gonna be able to do too much with it. One negate pass isn't really gonna help you with an Ash Blossom unless you really know what to negate and things like that. So, yeah. Alright, so this game was, I think I was in PLAT 2. It was one of my games that got me to, I was in the middle of my climb to get to PLAT 1. So I start out with a emergency teleport. I'm going first, you know, he max E's me. And, you know, with the max E up, I'm like, okay, I can extend or I can just try to play as safe as possible. I know the emergency teleport's going to banish this card at the end phase, so I've decided to just let that go through. I have the max E, I have the Nibiru and 2 imperms, I can play it out. So I find out they're playing Tri-Brigade, and I'm like, okay, well, if they're playing Tri-Brigade, they're probably not going to special summon a whole lot, but in case if they do, and because I don't have a play on board, I'm going to max E just to stop them from, like, basically blowing me out. So they start making their standard plays, standard Tri-Brigade plays, you know, ending the Kuraz, yada yada yada. Remember, they're under max C, so they choose to stop their plays. So the turn changes, it's my turn, I draw my Ash Blossom. Okay, that's good, that's really good, that can help me, like, kind of stop him from playing. I normal summon my Sentinel, especially activate my Psi-Reflector's effect, add the Assault Mode activate in hand, and then proc the Assault Mode, the Psi-Reflector to special Sentinel, yada yada yada, the whole 9. But they decide to DD Crow me. And that's a problem, because now I'm like, okay, I don't have a play anymore. This is rough. They banish my Sentinels. I can't summon the Sentinel because it's banished by DD Crow. I can't make this Stardust, so I pass. So now I'm kind of open here. So they activate the Tenki. They add their Zodiac, which is unfortunate because that's a Zeus if it ever, you know, if it resolves later in the game. Luckily for me, I had the double Imperm. Kuraz gets negated. They banish all their resources. Thank God they couldn't make a play here because it would have been pretty rough. They definitely wouldn't have summoned 5 times and I would have probably lost. They opt to go for the Pot of Desires, which makes my Ash Blossom live, and the reason I choose to Ash this is because my opponent didn't make a play after that turn, the previous turn or whatever, so I decided, like, they probably don't have a whole lot here anyways after the max E turn, so they probably don't have a play here like that. So I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna Ash that Desires and we go on from there. So I summon I activate the Sentinel, summon the Psi-Reflector. I actually finally get to a play. The reason I added the Assault Beast in my hand is because I didn't have any more Psi-Reflectors in my deck. So I'm like, okay, well, I might as well add like a Beat Stick or something, you know? So especially summon the Stardust, and from here, I'm like, okay, at least I have a Negate, and at least I have the Imperm and the Nibiru. Not the end of the world here. So I set the Activate, and my opponent goes. Now, of course, I was kind of clenching there because I was hoping that they didn't have an Ash Blossom in that situation. They didn't, and they summoned the Zodiac. So right here, they're about to attack me directly, make the Zeus, and basically blow me out. They go to battle phase. I Imperm it so they can't attack me directly, which means that they can't make their Zeus, but they wasted their normal summon. So I'm like, okay, this is perfect. I draw into the Fire Ant, send the Nib to the grave, and from here, I'm able to make a big 3000 attack body, normal summon this Assault Beast, and finish the game from there.